Good morning, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Welcome back to the CI Chit Chat. My name is Mitchell Hora. I'm the founder and CEO here at Continuum. I've got a special guest with me today, actually my dad. If you've been following our stuff for a while, you've seen that we've done webinars together periodically, and especially now as we are in April and thinking about planting, maybe not planting today since it's pouring rain out there, but as we get ready for planting, as we go into the year, wanted all of you to be able to better understand exactly how we're approaching all this on our own farm and what we are thinking about in regards to managing our cover crop, getting ready for planting, managing fertility, all these things, and of course, how that's going to tie into our carbon intensity. So our cover crop strategy might be a little bit different than what it would have been 3 days ago now with the rain. But anyway, we'll dig into that. Let me tee up just like we do every single time. I'm sure a lot of new folks continuing to come on. So what is CI? What the heck is carbon intensity? Carbon intensity is essentially the carbon footprint per bushel. And that's important because the carbon footprint per bushel becomes part of the carbon footprint of the gallon or of the pound of beef or of the carton of eggs or whatever the next product may be. Most importantly for right now, it's part of the gallon of biofuel because those gallons of biofuel have 45Z tax credits to compensate biofuel producers to lower the carbon intensity score. So as we are approaching this growing season, the bushels that we're going to be producing on our farms are part of the carbon footprint of the gallons of ethanol that are gallons of ethanol or biofuel that are going to be produced in 2025. So as farmers, we've got to get our data organized. We've got to get our scores understood and get our data verified here this year so that we can help our biofuel friends as they look to decarbonize and maximize the 45Z tax credit in calendar year 2025. So how do you do that? You can do that on our software. It's topsoil.ag. Takes just a couple minutes and you can get your carbon intensity score. It looks at all the inputs, basically every pass across the field, because part of the score is how much diesel fuel are you burning? How much fertilizer are you using? What's your cover crop? What's your tillage? Are you using manure? What's your yield? It's basically every single thing that happens on the farm. You can get that score at topsoil.ag. We show you how to improve that score, but we encourage you to get verified. It's $5 an acre, not a big deal. Get that data organized, get it verified so that you're ready to rock and roll. We have ran that process now on over 215 million bushels, which just blows my mind. Started talking about it on social media today that we just blew right past the 100 million bushel mark, and now we're over 200 million already, growing like crazy, and we're going to be at 1 billion bushels this year. I mean, it seemed like a big lofty goal when we set that goal in December, but we're going to do it, and hopefully we'll go even more, more than 1 billion, because somebody's got to do it. And we might as well help and make sure that farmers know what their scores are. And then we help you to get that data into whatever software the ethanol plants are using, so that you can get compensated, you can get paid. So anyway, we'll get into some of the questions here. If you've got questions, be sure to put them in the chat. Diana is monitoring, and but I'll tee up things with my guest here today. So Dad, maybe give a little bit of background intro on you for any of the folks that haven't seen you on one of our webinars before, and maybe a little bit about the farm and stuff too, just a brief intro.
Okay, yeah, so I've been farming back here after getting out of school since 1985. Been working no-till for a lot of years, and in the last, what is it, 11 years now, we've been cover cropping.
Since 2013.
Since 2013, yeah. So, and the last 6 or 7 years is basically 100% cover cropped. We have some strips in a trial that have not been cover cropped yet. So, but everything else is cover cropped all the time. And corn and soybeans rotation, but we have the rye worked into it as well. So we're doing some relay crop rye as well. And then got some custom operations, custom farming that we do as well. Basically the same practices on spread over some extra acres. But as I got up this morning, the first thought that came into my mind, I'm like, it's been raining all night. And I was trying to remember, maybe somebody on the call here this morning will maybe wrote it down, but I remember back as in December, and I was thinking it was right before Christmas. We had some days where it was really foggy.
Oh, yeah.
Which would be about 100 days ago. So I don't know if anybody wrote it down or not, but at that time, I'm like, I'm not worried about it because it's early enough. it's no big deal. But here is this rain that we finally got. That's if it's that 100 days, that maybe somebody knows. So, but we're pushing 2.25 inches since Sunday. So creeks are filling up and water's flowing this morning.
2.25 inches is the biggest rain that we've had since 15 months ago.
At least, yeah, probably.
At least 15 months, probably.
Yeah.
We didn't have
anything like that last year.
No.
Not on a broad scale basis like this.
It had to have been last winter at some point.
Yeah.
So, that's crazy. So biggest rain in well over a year. We will definitely take it. Maybe go a little bit further. We got a whole bunch of questions here, and again, put them in the chat, especially in the questions that you've got for Dad, especially some of you farmers or biofuel folks that want to pick the brain of a farmer. Maybe share your thoughts on. Obviously, you've been watching everything we've been building here for years. We've been looking at all these carbon things, never been able to do anything. We did the Nestle and Arva program here this past year as our first kind of program, but especially now as we're looking at CI, kind of what's your thoughts and how has that progressed for you?
Yeah, so we've been collecting the data and obviously using the topsoil tool to collect this and our regenerative roadmap and everything prior to that we had. So building, tracking everything that we've been doing, just in case we need the information. And because you never know which program is going to pop up when and where. And so last year, that was a great example of it. As you mentioned, the ARVA program that we participated in. All of our maps are there, yield maps, field boundaries, all the practices that we had been doing. And we've got them for a number of years now. In fact, for one of the programs, we had started building and went back 10 years and made certain that all of the data from 10 years was in. That was a lot of work.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time digging through all of that. But it's interesting to kind of go back and pull all those records together into one location. And then the other piece that we had done about a year ago was I went back as we were looking into the carbon intensity and the default for fuel usage into a system like ours of no-till cover crop is 7.2 gallons of diesel fuel per acre.
That's the GREET default.
That's the GREET default. And so I'm like, that's way too high. So I actually went back through the past 3 years of purchases of fuel to see what kind of diesel fuel delivery we had to the farm. Of course, I had to do a little work because, as I said, I've done some custom work. So what fuel got used on those acres, I had to track as well. But, we're probably closer to 4.5 than we are to 7 on this. So significant decrease. And I did notice that somebody in the questions had asked about using a drone and for applications of chemicals or seeding. And there would probably be some savings, but in my records and such, and I'm sure others would agree with this, a sprayer doesn't use that much fuel per acre. It would be less than 1/10 of a gallon. And little incremental changes like that, okay, they might help a little bit, but it's gallons that make a big difference.
That's a self-propelled sprayer.
It's
right?
self-propelled.
If you had to pull behind and using a tractor or something like that,
you're still going to be
small.
pretty small because you cover such a big area in a very short period of time. It doesn't take a lot of power to run one of those across. So it's those that add up fast are those that use a lot of horsepower. Tillage is the biggest, obviously, and combine. Combine uses a lot of fuel, and tillage does as well.
Nah, that's great. Especially now you mentioned the multiple years of data that you tracked back. At some point here, when we got an intern that needs a fun job, we'll have to have them go back through and run the CI score for all those historical years. It'd be just kind of something interesting or something that could give an intern a bunch of practice. Running scores where they could go back through and basically run the CI score for every field every year, all the way back, to watch and see how it's progressed, and on our own farm to see the fluctuation and the changes and stuff.
And the fluctuation really, for the most part, because the practices haven't changed that much. Other than the cover crop, out,
fertilizer,
and then there'd be some with the fertilizer as well, and then yield, of course.
The yield would be the big one.
The yield would really make the big impact.
Cool. Well, we're gonna crank through some of the questions here. I'll address the one that Diana got in the chat for us here real quick. First, I got a variety of others going to crank through and put questions in the chat or let us know any questions for myself or especially for Dad here too. Brenda is asking about the possibility of Canadian canola being added for the GREET score, and having some of that oil qualify for the 45Z credits here. So the answer in the short term is probably not, but I know that the folks at the Argonne National Lab are adding canola to the GREET model. It sounds like they're adding canola, and I'd heard that they're adding wheat as well. So I don't know if you'll be able to run those scores for Canada or not. This is a U.S. Department of Energy tax credit and for fuel produced in the U.S. So I don't know exactly what there is for Canada, but at least that canola is going to be added to the GREET model soon, and we'll see if they add in Canada or not. I know they run corn in Canada, but I don't know what they'll do for canola. But be continuing to watch, because there's definitely going to be some opportunity there in the future for you, Brenda. Okay, so yeah, that already started answering Jeff's question. Does the GREET model have figures in place for UAV application of chemicals, or are there aerial seed into covers? And he kind of answered it that the method of application of pesticide or cover crop, that isn't factored in, but what is factored in is the fuel usage. So since you're using electricity for that drone rather than using diesel fuel, you'd have the decrease in diesel fuel, but you don't necessarily get credit for it being a drone. Like the GREET model doesn't care. And to your point, that pesticide application is probably only a tenth of a gallon per acre.
Yeah, it's very low.
But if you're seeding covers with the drone versus that would maybe make a little bit more of a difference.
Yeah, it could.
That'd make more of a difference. So basically, the drone, no, but the change in fertile and fuel, yes. Jesse, hopefully we got to your question already. What is CI? How do I measure it? CI, it stands for carbon intensity. It's a metric utilized, especially in the biofuel space and just in the energy space in general. The units are grams of GHG equivalents per megajoule or per BTU. How do you measure it? It's measured with the GREET model. That's GREET. It was developed by the Department of Energy. And at Continuum Ag, we've made it really easy for you to run your GREET score. Go to topsoil.ag, complete a corn farm profile, and you can run your score from there. Utilize our discount code BBC95 for the billion bushel challenge, which we are now over 200 million bushels in that billion bushel challenge. So cranking away. All right, we got a bunch more of them, and definitely put them in the chat here. If ethanol plants are paid at the end of the year, does this suggest that producers might not be paid until the end of the year also? So definitely we'll key you in on this and kind of what you've heard too, but how we are anticipating this, the ethanol plants here, Jeff's correct, that they basically aren't made full until they are submitting their taxes, which wouldn't be at the end of the year. It's when they're submitting their taxes the following year. That's when you can actually sell these credits. So let's put it to an example. So the ethanol plant, and again, any biofuels, but an ethanol plant will start documenting their carbon intensity starting Jan 1, 2025, and really as far as detailed tracking of their carbon intensity. Companies have been doing this for years, but fuel produced in 2025, they will document the carbon intensity. They can start communicating with tax credit buyers. They can start lining up the contracts with tax credit buyers, but they technically cannot transact on the tax credit until after December 31st, 2025. Okay, so because you have to have the full year of production done, therefore have one weighted average score representing that entire year worth of production. And that weighted average score has to go through a verification process with the third-party verifier. And then they will determine, a CPA firm would determine the number of tax credits warranted. They write what's called an opinion letter, just like anybody that does R&D tax credits or things like that. But a CPA firm writes an opinion letter. The ethanol company gets tax credits, and they can actually transact and sell those credits for whatever they aren't able to utilize themselves. Some biofuel manufacturers can use them themselves. Many of them will sell, especially the farmer-owned co-ops. So they'll sell those tax credits. Hopefully they already have the deals lined up. And we're talking with some of our ethanol plants we work with. They are already lining up buyers for these tax credits in massive chunks. So there's some meetings this week. They're talking huge contracts on these tax credits. Incredible. So they are already working on who's going to buy, but technically they can't sell the tax credit until after 2025 or after that calendar year. Then they would bring in the final cash. So how do they do that? They're going to have to start buying the low carbon corn as early as Q4 of this year, because if you're going to be producing low carbon fuel on January 1, you got to have low carbon corn in the bin on December 31. So they might not start paying for it in October or September, but they're sure going to have to figure out how to get low carbon corn in the bin in December. And now the problem is we have no idea when these final rules are going to come. There was supposed to be some rules out on March 1. We still don't have the rules, but these ethanol manufacturers are likely going to have to at least pay an estimate payment to get the low carbon bushels and to get the data. That way they can run the scores. That way they can sell the tax credits. And likely there would be a settle up payment, kind of like a dividend payment at the end once they know exactly how much credits they've actually garnered. But so long story short, likely a estimated payment when delivering. For our farm, we're not going to sell our data for nothing. Like if they want to produce the carbon credits and the tax credits, if they want our data, like that costs money. It costs real money for everything that we're doing to get it verified, get all this data put together. We want to collaborate, we want to work together, but the data is what creates the value and creates the credits. So there's going to have to be some financial transactions there, but you're seeing a lot of these conversations too.
So yeah, as you're talking about this, and not knowing all the rules yet, and not having the experience of even being able to do this at this point, as you mentioned, they have their cumulative score at the end of 2025. Not everybody's tax returns or tax year ends January or December 31st. So what we don't know is the company that ends, say, July or June 30th. So if they get 6 months in next year, can they file based off of when they file the return that year? They're only halfway through this, but if they have to collect the scores for an entire year, that means that company, instead of doing it this time next year, isn't turning their returns in until July or August or September of the following year. To be able to know what they need for their own credits. So it'll be interesting to see who gets first to the table to try to sell these credits. I would assume that the early guy is going to really want to go after this and be very aggressive and sell what they can sell.
If they could, do that as a partial year based on whenever their fiscal year ends. Right? If their fiscal year ends in the year. And that's where it's really not laid out at all. In the credit, it simply just says for biofuel produced after December 31, 2024. That's the actual words in the law. But so fuel produced after December 31, 2024. So I don't know if they'll have a couple months worth of credit to create. I would think so.
But it's hard to tell. I guess we don't know that rule yet.
It depends on when the IRS rules come out.
Their auditors are going to have to figure that one out.
But nonetheless, very high chance, for sure, this data is very valuable. And this is not this has to be collaborative between the biofuel producers and the farmer, but it's the data and the CI scores that creates the value for the biofuel producer that they can generate these credits on. They are going to have cash up front to be able to do this and buy the data and buy the bushels. But some of these nuances.
Your point about the data, getting the data collected ahead of time, and hopefully they are going to pay a decent amount of that out ahead of time, because if they don't, there's no incentive for the farmers to really give them their score and give them good data. And it could be a year or two before they actually collect all their funds. So if they really want to have an impact on it, what we're doing, well, maybe next week now in the field again, is going to impact that. And if they're going to say we're not going to pay anything out until we have the money in hand, it's not going to move the needle the way they want it to.
Our buddy Tom here with Siouxland, who's been really leading the charge on this, saying as a producer, they can sell their corn in the fall of 2024 for delivery in fall of 2024 and still be able to qualify for the credits in 2025. Tom, essentially what it would be is that we've got the pile of low carbon corn over here, right? So we got the high carbon corn or the unknown CI corn in the bin. We're going to continue to utilize that for 2024 production. Then come Jan 1, we've had this low carbon corn stockpiled and can start utilizing that, right? How do you track that through? Don't know, but we're going to have low carbon corn on hand come December 31 to start using on Jan 1. So it's going to depend on how much storage the biofuel producer has. It's going to depend on how aggressive they want to get with competing with other buyers of this low carbon corn, because other people are going to be gunning for it. Like other people are already looking at how do they line up contracts, how do they line up um, producers of this low carbon grain, how do they make sure that they've got supply so that they're ready. I mean, we're going to have to, it's going to be some competition here because the supply of low carbon corn is very, very low, almost none, right? We've got a couple 100 million bushels, but it's all got to go through verification still. So the supply is low, the demand is 5.4 billion bushels. So it's going to create some competition there that biofuel producers are going to have to get that low carbon corn in early. We'll crank through a couple others. Jody in the chat, how do you show the LP and electricity used if you do not dry your own crop but take it to the co-op? So Jody, that LP and that electricity would not be on your CI, but it would be on the co-op's CI. So likely what they'll have to do is they already dock you for bringing them high moisture corn, right? Well, now they're going to have to dock off of your CI score a little bit as well, because the CI score of your grain that you deliver is going to be different than when they deliver the grain, because they're going to have to dry down that crop and move it and utilize electricity and utilize diesel fuel to get it to the next market, or however they end up doing it. So it's minuscule, but they will have to factor in that change in the CI between when they receive the corn versus when they deliver the corn.
That corn that they get though, on anything fuel usage or energy usage, there's a default on it already. So if you bring higher moisture corn in, the co-op won't be able to go in unless they have good records, very good records, and can prove that they are below what that default number would be. But high moisture corn is going to bring their number up.
Yeah.
So most likely they're going to use whatever the default is on the fuel, the energy usage.
Sure.
But what we don't know, I guess, is when there's another extra step of that in there. The corn CI that we're calculating is to the grain bin on the farm.
Yeah.
Once it goes to the co-op, there's another step in there.
Yeah.
And that it has to be accounted for somewhere, because there's transportation, more energy usage, and that drying cost that was assumed on that produced bushel from the farm.
Yeah.
So
and
there's already a number in there for it.
Yeah, there's additional steps, right? That at the ethanol plant, they add to the CI score as well, and their manufacturing and their emissions, all of that stuff. On the farm, the score is a default based on a county default of around 29, right? 29.1. You hear us talk about a lot. In Washington County, Iowa, where we are, the default is 29.4. But the ethanol plant has a score of around 55. Well, those additional points between 29 and 55, they come from all these additional steps. They all have to be factored in. Our buddy Jeff, we use fuel to transport to the market, the grain trucks, the pickup truck, all of that. Yep, that's all got to be looked at, all got to be accounted for. Those on-road vehicles have a carbon footprint to them as well. We got to track all that stuff. So there is going to be a balance on how far away your market is. What we don't yet know is, are the credits and the bushels going to be decoupled? But at this point, we anticipate for our market, it is a little bit further to truck the corn to the ethanol plant versus our typical market here in Washington County of feeding hogs. And we're going to have to factor in that additional fuel usage. It's not going to be a massive impact, but it's something.
That's part of their tier 3 emissions.
Their scope 3, yeah.
Your scope 3, because the CI of the corn is not the only scope 3 emission that they have.
That's right.
There's multiples in there, and that transportation and storage piece would be a part of that as well.
A couple other we'll crank through. If anyone else has some, put them in the chat too. We're about out of time here. These always go way too fast, but everything here is recorded. It's on our YouTube page. Carson from our submit a question tool said, hey, I would like to know how to get my score. Carson, go to our YouTube page. Just a couple weeks ago, I did a video showing you the Mitchell Hora version of how to run your CI score on topsoil. But go to Continuum Ag on YouTube. We've got a pretty slick YouTube video there where I walk through getting your score. But feel free to contact us, info@continuum.ag, or just get on topsoil and create an account. One of our salespeople will reach out and hit you up. I want to understand how animal production and feed ingredients play in the carbon process. This question's coming in from Terry. So Terry, the animal piece is going to have to figure this out, and what's the score going to be associated to the DDGs that are going to those animals, or are they going to be able to utilize low carbon corn to produce low carbon pork? They're going to have to figure that out. And they don't have tax credits to pay for it. So these credits are going to be extremely disruptive. That's what we've been yelling about it for more than a year, well over a year. We've been pushing this and pushing this to make sure that people understand, because so many of our neighbors here in Washington County, they're buying corn that by and large in this county has a pretty darn low CI score. There's a lot of no-till, there's a lot of manure, there's a lot of cover crop, and those bushels are going to be incentivized to leave the county and be sold to the ethanol plants or to the biofuel producers. So the local hog guys, they're still going to have corn. Only so much corn can go into biofuel, but it could be different bushels. But been pushing on the packers and the banks and stuff. They've got to get ahead of this and figure out how they can produce sustainability programs to incentivize the low carbon producers to stay internal to their supply chain. Looking at it as a scope 3 reduction, kind of along the lines of a carbon inset, not exactly, but more along that process of lowering the footprint internal to your supply chain. A couple others here. Okay, Jeff is saying, what items or info do I need to keep track and input to make a score? It's basically every pass across the field using that. It's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you're asking what type of tillage, and your model is actually asking more than what the Greek model requires, because we don't know. They might want more in the future, and agronomically to help people out, maybe it's better to ask a few more questions. And it's really not that much more. It's a couple of items of specific on your tillage practices versus just is it minimum till, no till, or strip till.
Yeah, Jeff,
and then your inputs, your fertilizers is very detailed.
Basically every pass across the field, Jeff. So go to topsoil.ag, do the farm profile. Don't go into a ton of details. We get to the details when we're actually verifying the scores and documenting the actual practices, which is why we're charging farmers $5 an acre to get going on that, so we can help you to document your actual practices as they occur here in calendar year 2025 or 2024, excuse me. But you can look and do the farm profile. It takes about 10-15 minutes. Plug in the basic data and you run the score. But it's fertilizer, fuel, yield, tillage, manure, cover crop, all that good stuff. Elliot's asking, what's the premium? Right? Where's the money? That's always the question. We don't know. And again, we have to be very thoughtful about this. The credits and the dollars that we show in topsoil is not the dollar to the farmer. We have no idea what the dollar to the farmer is going to be. The biofuel manufacturers are our friends in this, that they get the tax credit, not the farmer. It's a biofuel producer tax credit. And again, that's why non-biofuel verticals are going to have to figure out how to compete, because it's the biofuel producers that get the tax credit. And if the rules get written the way that is spelled out in the law, they'll be able to utilize low carbon bushels to produce low carbon biofuel. So how the math works is the ethanol company has to get their score below 50 to start. That's the magic number. For every point below 50, as long as they meet some red tape, the biofuel producer earns up to 2 cents per point per gallon. So at the end of the year, they look at their score, go 50 minus their score times 2 cents. That gives you the tax credit value in terms of the pennies per gallon. Every ethanol plant has a little bit different conversion from bushels to gallons. We utilize the most conservative math possible, which is to take 1 bushel of corn and create 2.7 gallons of ethanol. Therefore, the financial impact that us on the farm can help our biofuel producers make would be the 2 pennies per gallon multiplied by the conversion of gallons to bushels, in this case 2.7. That means that every point we reduce on the farm can create a potential tax credit impact of about 5.4 cents per CI point reduced per bushel. The biofuel manufacturer is going to have a lot of costs in this. Farmers have a lot of costs in this, and creating the credits have plenty of costs. So we've got to split the pie, but some significant potential financials available there. We encourage you to just get started with getting your score, and we show you what the total potential value would be. We anticipate building out some kind of a price discovery tool later on this year to help our producers understand the bids that are out there, as our biofuel producers look to source bushels from our low carbon farmers. Last couple things here. I know we're at time. Is there a limit or an end of the life for the 45Z tax credits? This is coming in from Greg. It's due to sunset at the end of 2027. So this is 2025 through 2027 production. Then it's due to sunset, could be extended. We don't know. Is there a limit on them? That is still yet to be put out in every single tax credit does have a limit on it. But they're very flexible and not super worried about that limit. But it's more so this is a 3-year opportunity for biofuel producers and farmers to squeeze this juice as much as we can and really make this happen. Good question here from Carmen. Have you done this with soybeans? Yep, you can run soybeans. We can do that in topsoil today, but the score that we show you in topsoil is the carbon footprint per bushel, not necessarily per megajoule like what we do for corn, but you can still check that out. Currently doing this Mark, interested in learning. He's doing strip till, doing cover crops, kind of similar on our stuff. Maybe final thoughts on your side of kind of how you're approaching this as you go into the year. And
yeah, track everything that you can do, minimize your fuel usage because it's going to help your score. But one of the things that we've kind of looked into and haven't put it into our score yet, that we've been talking about the -4, we have not put in fuel usage yet. And if we have that reduced by a gallon or 2 per acre, it's going to have pretty good impact on our score. So multiple ways of doing that. Using the monitor system of the equipment is a great start, but also make certain you separate your diesel fuel usage for your crop production, especially if you're a livestock guy.
Yeah.
Do what you can to track those volumes where they're going.
Yeah.
So that would be a great start. But and then very carefully look at what you're doing with your fertility program.
Yeah. Go to topsoil.ag, get your score. You can play with those scenarios like Dad's talking to see what your score would be and see what the main drivers would be. One of our agronomists would be happy to help walk through that, or hit up one of our dealers who knows how to run those scores. It can help you out as well. It all takes data. So be documenting, be thinking about this stuff. Our biofuel friends, they need our help. Farmers, we've got an amazing opportunity, but it takes data. So be thinking about that as you go into the season. Good luck. Hopefully you guys are getting some rain like we are as well. Final thought?
Yeah, one last comment. You have this webinar today at 1 o'clock with Dr. Rodrigo Worley from University of Wisconsin, weed specialist. He was at a program that Mitch and I were both at earlier this past year in the wintertime. Dr. Worley's got some very interesting information on using rye for weed control.
Yes. Yeah.
And herbicide interactions, growth stages of rye, how to make that work extremely well for your system. So if you've got farmers, or if you're a farmer, or if you've got farmers that are interested in doing this and just really uncertain about how to use the rye, Dr. Worley has some great research from up in the Wisconsin area.
Yep. Thanks, Diana, for that. Thanks for the reminder. 1 o'clock today. You can check out our social media or go to continuum.ag. It's all on our website as well. We'll see everyone at 1 o'clock. We'll see you all next week on the Chit Chat here as well. Have a good one.